Good morning, good people of YouTube or any of the podcast sites. You may be just listening to this because this is available as audio-only versions at all the regular places. I am sitting here with no other than Mr. Quan from Regurgitator. Hey, Quan, how you going, bro?
Good. How you doing, Rick?
Keep it down back there. Keep it down. Keep it down. I'm good, mate. I got to say, I said to you before, I was always a big Gurge fan, so it's nice to have you on for a bit of a chat, man. And
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
not just guitars. I was always a fan of you guys' production and stuff. Anyone that knows me knows I've worked a fair bit in the production world as well. And I tend to, back in the 90s, listen to what was on the radio, and you guys were everywhere back then. And you still play. You've been playing again, right?
We had a big year last year. We toured quite a lot. Like, I think we did about, I don't know, must have been close to 80 shows or something. Or maybe a few less, maybe 50, 60 shows.
And I am kicking myself that I didn't catch any, man. I really am. I need to
There's always
start.
next time.
Yeah, I need to subscribe to some street press or something, because it's not till afterwards when people are posting photos. I'm like, how did I miss that?
Yeah, it's strange. I don't know how people find out about shows mostly these days. I assume just through Facebook and following bands and stuff. I don't really know.
Yeah.
I've been to a few shows recently, more than I normally would, and I just moved house, so it's kind of strange that I'm further away from the city. But I've seen probably more acts in the last 6 months than I have in years for some weird reason.
Yeah.
So I've seen some pretty cool acts.
Yeah. I don't know that we used to get back in the day. I'm trying to think of the name of the street press that was getting around in Brisbane.
Was it like the Beat or something, or what was it called? Oh God, I don't know.
You got me, but that was
still based in Brisbane? Are you in Brisbane?
I'm on the
now?
Gold Coast.
Oh, you're on the Gold Coast. Okay.
Yeah. So, did you guys play Miami Marquetta recently or last year?
Yeah, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's just around the corner from me, and it's not until after the show, I said, that I find out. Yeah. So, Quan, I usually start these, as I told you before, by quizzing people about what sparked the fire for the guitar and music in general for you.
I guess it was. I think it was listening to Led Zeppelin, finding Led Zeppelin 2, I think it was, and then Hendrix live at Winterland on tape.
Yeah,
I had it on tape. I remember that tape distinctly. So those two records probably were the things that really got me interested in guitars and going, oh wow, this is a really cool sound. There's some awesome riffs. I'll try and teach myself. So I had an acoustic guitar that I think I stole and then gave back to the school. It was a really crappy acoustic. I think it might have been a 12-string, but I don't think I strung it that way. And then I just would teach myself how to play by listening to his records. And my mother went to LA once and very kindly brought me back a Gibson S1, actually, which was a Stratocaster version of a Gibson guitar, but there's trying to be a Strat. So it had three single coils, quite a thin, solid body guitar, but reasonably lightweight and a decent neck on it. So I was very lucky to start on a reasonably good guitar.
Do you remember what the first song you learned to play was?
Oh God. I don't offhand, but it would have been something like Foxy Lady or Voodoo Child, something like that, probably. And then I can't remember what's on Led Zeppelin 2 offhand now, but probably Communication Breakdown or something like that. That's on the first record though. I don't know what's on the second. I can't think.
Yep. Cool. And at what point did you get good enough to start playing in bands?
Well, that's debatable. I don't know if I'm really good enough now, but I started. I think I joined a high school band called The Crunge, obviously named off
The Crunge.
Which is a song off Led Zeppelin 3, I think.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Or maybe it's off 5. Maybe it's off Houses of the Holy. But yeah, that was the name of the high school band. So I played, and I think at that stage I had a Gibson Les Paul by then.
Yeah, nice.
So I was listening to Guns N' Roses as well when that Appetite for Destruction record came out. I really got into that. Slash is playing.
That was a total game changer, wasn't it, for a lot of people?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Incredible. I love the way that he constructs guitar solos as well. He's not just a flashy player. He has a real sense of melody and where he wants to take it. And I feel like those kind of players are the players I've always been attracted to. I'm not really into the crazy kind of, even Van Halen, he's incredibly skilled, but he also knows how to direct a solo into a decent place. So I think Slash was the first guy that really impressed me. Jimmy Page as well. Yeah. And Hendrix to a different way. I mean, Hendrix is just part of his instrument, so he just played exactly what he felt, and you could
Yeah,
hear it when he's playing. So there's no one that touches him.
yeah.
Um,
You're right though about Slash being so melodic. I mean, the guitar solo in "Sweet Child of Mine," that's a
yeah,
song in itself, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. But the
It
whole
really
song
is.
is constructed for the solo as well. Like the chord progressions alter. So they're writing the song with the solo in mind, and he's thinking about it and working out where to go with it, taking it to a higher place, and then letting it drop back into the song really brilliantly. And that a lot of my friends didn't like Ben hates Guns N' Roses, and they haven't aged particularly well. I'll definitely give him that. But that record in particular, I was obsessed with, and I just the guitar playing in particular on that record really changed my view of guitar playing and just heavy metal in general.
Yeah, yeah. So Van Halen was a big turning point. You mentioned Eddie as well, and the great thing about Ed is he does all the blah, 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 but it's usually the last lick of the song is just this
Yep.
most beautiful melodic thing that just brings it
Yeah.
home.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
that's the difference, right?
That guy's technique is just off the charts. I never really got into Van Halen. I mean, I like the songs, their pop songs a lot, like Jump and Panama and all that stuff, uh, because they're great songs, and the way the band gels is brilliant. And David Lee Roth and his voice and his antics and shit. But I never listened to Van Halen as a player because it always felt out of reach for me. I never got technically that good, so it was always out of reach. So I never really listened to him and tried to learn his stuff at all ever.
Yep.
I did listen I did get Steve Vai's Flex Sable
Yeah.
record when I was quite young as well,
Yep.
and I remember listening to that and go, "What the fuck?" Uh, but yeah, that was probably a fairly standard reaction to that record, I would imagine at the time.
Yeah. Cool.
I listened to that recently again. Actually, it's still pretty out there.
It is very out there, isn't it? I've only sat through it once or twice because it was kind of hard to get a hold
It's a
of
hard listen. Yeah.
to back in the day. But what I did notice on there was there's a few little themes, recurring themes on it that happen in his later solo work as well.
Oh, really?
So
I haven't listened to any of his newer stuff.
yeah, right. And Eddie Van Halen's done that as well, where there's certain themes that were in a solo that he's made a song out of albums later, and you're just like,
Right, right.
yeah, there's a little earworm there.
Yeah, right.
Hey, Quan, at what point did you start writing songs?
Pretty early on. I remember doing a mixtape for my in my high school audio visual. I can't remember production and performance class. I think it was called.
Cool.
I went to Kelvin Grove before it was just a primary school.
Yep.
Sorry, just a secondary school.
Yep.
So when it was Kelvin Grove High, and they didn't have very good programs or anything like that. It was pretty average primary school at that point, state school. But they had a production and performance class, and I was like, I'm going to record music and bring it in. So my first tape that I made was called something like the Happy Diphthong, and it had like this weird Frank Frazetta picture of the Mothman on it, or some weird guy with an elephant nose or something on it, and it was just a collection of weird songs that I'd recorded on my I think I had a Tascam Porter Studio at the time, or maybe the Yamaha. I can't remember. A lot of the early stuff I did was on a Yamaha Porter Studio type thing. I can't remember the exact model,
Yep.
but it had an awesome DBX switch on it, which you see VST emulations of now, which is kind of nuts.
Yeah.
So when you switched it, it had this effect of taking the compression off or the DBX off, whatever it was doing to it, and just
Yeah.
opened up the sound, so it sounded like it was being compressed or something.
Yeah,
It
right.
just really, I blew it open, and I just remember that was like the magic switch on the box, and so I would record something with it on, take it off, and just be like, "Whoa, yeah, this sounds so much better."
Yeah,
So it's a 4-track.
it's funny how some cheap gear. I had this little Boss mixer when I first started trying my hand at production, tiny little faders and stuff, and I just knew that when all the inputs went into the red, shit just started sounding good.
Yeah,
And
yeah, right.
I didn't understand why. And now, we spend our time trying to recreate that, the saturation
Yeah.
that you get from
Yeah,
overdriving
exactly.
the inputs. Yeah.
Tape and saturation. That's all about that.
Yeah, yeah. So you said you started writing then. Did you have a few bands before Regurgitator, or was that the first serious thing?
I joined a really shit blues band called 12 Bar Bernie and the Kick-Ass Blues Band, and I played in a couple of RSLs with the guy. He was a really strange character, Bernie. I don't know if he's still alive or not. I just remember the way he smoked joints was really lame. That's all I can remember. I actually played bass in that band. I don't think I played guitar.
Yeah.
Didn't last very long. And then I decided to join a band with my schoolmate Matt Wilkie, who was like an obsessive like slapper. He
Yep.
loved slap bass. He was obsessed with Primus. I got into Primus at that point. Was listening to the Chili Peppers' first couple of records before they went really bad. And yeah, he was a real slap aficionado. So he got me into Devo. He got me into Dead Kennedys. He also got me into Primus, and I guess the Chili Peppers. I kind of found my own. And we would get together with these other two people that I don't know how we met. I think Matt knew them before me, and so we were rehearsing a dress shop, an old warehouse that used to be an old dress shop that the drummer lived in with his really hot girlfriend. They were both circus people, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
had like 10 abs. He was like a skinny rake guy, and he worked for the circus, and he was one of the very few people in the Southern Hemisphere that could juggle 7 items at once, I think.
Wow.
And he was the drummer, and he was obsessed with polyrhythms and just playing really strange African beats. And Vic Pingle was the singer, and she was like a punk chick who was like an anarchist type woman with a very short temper. And Matt was the bass player. And so we would go up to this place in Fish Lane in West End and rehearse and listen to like, oh God, what's that metal band from the 90s that was big in Brisbane only pretty much? My manager managed them. That was his very first band that he managed. I can never remember their name. A bunch of really, really aggro metal. It was like metal thrash.
Oh, I wonder who that
Thrash.
was.
Poison and Soup was the name of the record. We listened to that on vinyl, and we listened to Primus in this dress shop, and then we would rehearse, and then we would go out and try and find gigs. And we got a couple of openers with Pangaea, for example, which was my bass player's from Regurgitator's his first big band.
Yeah.
And that was my intro into music, and it was the weirdest stuff. Like it was play as fast as you can, fusion of metal and punk, and weird time signatures, all that sort of stuff. When you're young, that's what you're into. So I did that with them. I later found out, but the drummer we'd go to shows. So I think we played at the Metro in the city when it was in the city, and he would invariably throw up. Like he'd throw up before every show we played. And I was like, what's wrong, man? Is it nerves and shit? It was later on, because I was so naive, that I found out they were all heroin addicts, like junkies, like, high level users. They could function, high functioning users, but they were all on. And I was just so I didn't even know. Like
I was the same, man. There was so many smackies on the scene down here in the 90s. It's funny, sound guys at venues. I'm not going to name any names. There was a guy at a pretty popular venue down here, and we all just used to take the piss out of him, thinking he was just a bit slow. And then there was a rehearsal/recording room, and the guy that ran that, we all just go, oh yeah, he's a bit slow. And it wasn't until years later I bumped into both these guys at the big day out, and they were normal. They'd kicked the habit. Like, what? And yeah, people who were a bit more in the scene going, yeah, those guys were junkies. And I was totally naive to all that as well. There was a lot around, eh?
Yeah, there was. They were pretty chill though to jam with as a result, I think.
Yeah.
But the music was frenetic as fuck. Like I listen to it now and I'm like, I don't know how I played that. I just don't have it in me now. It would be impossible for me to get my head around.
Yeah. And it's funny you said about them throwing up, because when I was quite young, there was a little stage where I would get nerves before a show and I'd have a little, but it was only because we had that many singers come and go. You may have heard of one of my first bands, the Pumpernickels. Did that ring a bell? Back in the day? Yeah, that was a pretty well-known band here on the Gold Coast. And then I had another band, Nemesis, back in the day. But we had that many singers come and go that it was like, Rick, you're doing it. And I was always a guitar player. And for the first few shows, I would actually beforehand.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I get when you say, was it nerves? But yeah.
Well, it might have been a bit of both. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing.
He's no longer with us, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a shame. That's a shame.
I think the drugs were to blame, but some people just never get over it.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Pangaea. I remember seeing them around the place and just thinking, wow, you guys are really, really good.
Yeah, they were wild.
Yeah. And the story I hear is that Ben was actually trying to shop around Pangaea, but happened to have you guys on the B-side, right?
Yeah, it wasn't a B-side. It was a separate demo that I was doing an SAE course at the time before computers. So it was all on tape. So we had like I think it was only an 8-track 8-track tape machine in there and a really
Yeah.
shitty desk
Yep.
in at the Paddington, or I guess what's the next one down? You'd call it Paddington. But the SAE had a studio set up there that they were doing lessons at,
Yep.
a course at, and I did that and finished it. And yeah, pretty much the only thing I learned was just to make that demo tape. That was pretty much
Oh,
it.
really?
So I got those guys in to record 4 songs, I think it was, and then because of Ben's relationship with Michael Parisi, who was from Warner, the A&R from Warner, who was interested in Pangaea at the time. Ben just said, "Here, check this out. I think you'll like it more." And so he listened to it, and he did. He liked it way more than Pangaea, and I think the guys from Pangaea were a little pissed about it actually for some
Right.
time. They
Yep.
got over it, but I think they were quite pissed about it. And yeah, that's how we got signed for that
Sure.
5-album deal.
How did you meet Ben?
Actually, the singer from my first band and him were hanging out quite a lot.
Yep.
I don't know if he was using at the time what was going on, but they came over to my mum's place to score pot because they knew my mum smoked a lot and she always had weed there. And I was the guy downstairs doing the music.
Yeah.
And Vic was like, "Yeah, come over. She's great. You'll love her." And they got high upstairs, and then he popped his head in downstairs, and I was tinkering around on my 4-track. And he was like, "Oh man, what are you working on?" And I think I may have played him the riff to Kung Fu Sing or something at the time.
Cool.
And then he was like, "Damn, I know this other drummer who's in Brasilia, this other kind of fusion rock band that was kicking around Brisbane and doing quite well. His name's Martin, and he's half Chinese, and I think we should have a jam." So he's always been the facilitator, Ben. He's always been the people guy and very kind of open about creating relationships. So he got the band to start rehearsing. I can't remember where we first rehearsed. I know we got a scheduled rehearsal going on with we shared a room with Powderfinger on Ann Street above Galaxy Records for a while there. And that's where I think a lot of the first songs are written.
Sweet. So you already had some material written beforehand then, huh?
I did, yeah. I had a few songs. I think I probably had track 1 written and Kung Fu Sing written and some heavier tunes as well. Like It Like That, I think came from jamming. And yes, a lot of the stuff on the first EP probably came from jamming with those guys as well.
Yeah, right. So you said you went to SAE and you learnt enough to do those demos and stuff. Was that your introduction to MIDI sequencing and stuff as well?
Oh God, no, that was well before that shit.
Oh, really?
It was really primitive, no computers at all that I remember there. And just a really old school teacher teaching you about like waveforms and, amplitude and shit like that. I didn't take any of it in at all at the time.
Oh, really?
The only thing I learned was how to roll leads correctly. And then just to do that demo on the seat of my pants, like I really had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't get introduced until I bought my first Pro Tools rig. I might have used Cubase first, very early iteration of it on an old power computing when Mac was dead and Apple was on the way down.
Yeah.
Man, I wish I bought shares then. But I had a Mac clone set up in my house.
Oh, cool.
That was a power computing computer that ran Mac OS, but was not an Apple. And that was the last time that ever happened, I think.
Yeah,
so that would have been early 90s, like 94, 95. And I ran Cubase. I think I started learning about MIDI then. And that would have been for the Unit record, I believe.
Sure.
Beginning of that.
Because the first 2 EPs didn't have... Oh, no, you had a couple loops and stuff on there. My introduction to you guys was I went to a festival called Alternative Nation.
Oh, God, yeah.
Do you remember that one?
I remember that very well. Because it rained. It poured down in every single place that we played.
Yeah,
like
right.
Just poured down, unusual. It was like an act of the devil or God or whatever, but it felt like it was cursed because the promoters looked really dodgy. I remember they just looked like characters out of like a really dodgy kind of novel, like really super dodgy dudes. And we just felt like the whole thing had some dark cloud hanging over it at the time.
Yeah. So I won like a dozen CDs. They had this matchmaking tent thing that a friend of mine's sister was running, where they would put people's details in it and it would match guys and girls. And and the funny thing is, man, they told me the story that it spat my name out, and they laughed. They went, "No, we can't have Rick. It'll seem rigged." And they kept trying to come up with new matches, and it just kept spitting me out with different girls, and to the point they just went, "This thing just wants Rick to win for some reason."
That's
And
bizarre.
and so I was performing there with the singer of the band I was in at the time, but just doing some busking around the place. So after we'd finished for the day, we went and smoked a joint, and I'm not really good in public stoned. I get really paranoid.
I'm the
And
same.
I'm about to watch some big band, maybe Tool or something like that play. And they come out and go, "Oh, we've got another match in the computer love match tent." And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, how embarrassing would it be if they called your name out right now?" And they called my name out. And I swear everyone in that stadium that knew me turned around and looked at me. But
That sounds like
of
a
the
really bad
CDs
trip.
that I won there, did you guys have 2 EPs out by then? Or was
Probably,
it?
yeah.
Yeah, I think there was both of them.
What year was it? Surely that was
95-ish?
95 by then.
95?
Yeah, we would have had both those EPs out for
Yeah.
sure. I think
So I reckon I got those. It was like Death Effects, it was Skunk Hour, 9 Inch Nails. Man, that was the first time I ever saw 9 Inch Nails. And
Oh,
that
wow.
was life-changing for me, seeing
Yeah,
them.
that was after Downward Spiral, was it? Or
It was the Downward Spiral tour.
yeah, man, that record is phenomenal.
Yeah. The crazy thing is they had the song Closer out.
Mm.
So I knew what Trent Reznor looked like. I'd seen him in the street press, just dating back to Pretty Hate Machine days. I'm standing in the crowd with the singer from a group called Rollerball back in the day, Matt. And I said to him, "Is that the singer from 9 Inch Nails standing just in front of us, man?" And he goes, "Nah, that's just a fan trying to look like him." And about 5 minutes later, this big security guy comes up, stands with this guy, and I watch them walk directly backstage. I'm like, "Oh my God, that was that guy. I should have said something." And after that performance, it revolutionized my world. I just saw what they did and went, "I don't know what the fuck that was, but I want to do that." And I
Yeah.
just lost myself in the world of production I forgot about being a guitar player for 15 years. I really
Oh,
did.
really? Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
his
Just,
production is really incredible. Like
yeah,
the way he brings it is just incredible.
absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, that was my exposure to you guys. Now getting back to, was there much programming from memory? There was the odd little loops and stuff that
It
would
would have
start
all
off.
been like just hand triggered S1000s, S2000s, like Akai
Yep.
samplers, all the way up until Unit, the end of Unit. We were using those. Like I've started doing singing lessons for some bizarre reason, just to protect my voice as I get older. And I was telling the story to my singing teacher yesterday about how we did the song formerly known as vocals were all resampled. Like he took all my vocals, like syllable by syllable,
Yeah.
and put them into the S1000s and then sequenced them in a really old version of Cubase that was running in tandem with Pro Tools.
Wow.
And so none of that is actually sung. It's all being triggered because that's all we had. That was the only way I could pitch it up that high at the
Yep.
time. Because neither me nor Ben, maybe Ben could do it at that time, but my voice was never that good, especially back then. I was constantly writing songs out of my key, which is the dumbest thing you can do. But that's the kind of price you pay when you teach yourself.
Yeah.
You make mistakes like that.
Yep.
So yeah, we used those samplers, and I think the introduction to that shit was through Martin. He was very on the cutting edge of technology. He introduced me to a lot of different technology, drum triggers. He used drum triggers a lot. He was really into hip hop, which I'd never listened to apart from when I was much younger. And I got my first hip hop record that I got into was Ice Cube's America's Most Wanted. And I listened to that when I was 19, and then the Beastie Boys and Cypress Hill, I guess. But he introduced me to Dre,
Yeah.
and Timberland as well.
Yep.
And yeah, that got me into production, like interested in beats, interested in how to record like cleaner and to do more varied things.
Yep. It's funny that you bring up Martin doing that because just when you guys started getting known, there was a little high-tech store in Brisbane right next to the stadium. I'm trying to think what that place was called. No
yes.
idea.
Did Andy Baglia run that? Or he was the main tech dude?
I got to know Andy through other stores after that, but there was this other place, not Music Lab. This is pre-Music Lab.
Oh, it wasn't Music Lab. I don't know. I don't know it then.
Yeah, it was right next to the stadium. But I remember
Oh
being in
yeah,
there and seeing Martin there and thinking, this is weird seeing a drummer in a high tech shop.
yeah. He was into
So
it, and he was
yeah,
really into
cool,
it.
cool. Because I was thinking maybe Magoo got you into all that kind of stuff.
Magoo had his head around it, but he was. I mean, he really kind of just pushed the Beatles and stuff on us for those
Oh,
early
really?
records. Yeah, he was more interested in pushing us in terms of communication between us as a band, which can be pretty bad when you're young, right? And you're
Yeah,
fighting
yeah,
for your rights in the studio. So he was very he just wanted us to be aware of how we brokered our individual opinions and to be as fair about things as we could be. So he worked on communication, he worked on production values and just experimentation, and he really wanted us to listen to the Beatles a lot and for songwriting tips. So that was more of his thing.
yeah, right.
Martin was definitely more into the tech side of things, I think.
Yeah. It's funny, like, Magoo really became the, producer everyone wanted to work with in Australia for a while there after working with you guys, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wanted to work with him on the last record, but it just didn't feel right. I don't know what I was expecting, but we kind of started talking to him again. All got kind of excited about it, but it just didn't really happen. For some reason, the spark wasn't there. I feel like he's moved on from that now. He's an academic now, and
I was gonna
he
say that. I heard that because I'm actually going to uni full time myself, studying production just to get my bit
okay,
of paper. I've been working in production for a long time in radio and stuff
yeah,
since the late '90s, but got to get qualified if you want to teach that kind of stuff at SAE or
right,
anything like that. So,
sure.
and I've heard his name mentioned that
Yeah,
he
he's
was
a
working
senior,
around.
senior lecturer now. I think at I want to say Griffith, but I'm not sure.
I thought SAE or Sunshine Coast. Is he Sunshine Coast based,
Oh yeah,
perhaps?
Sunshine Coast. That sounds right.
Yeah, yeah. Cool, cool. So, just looking at unit and stuff, I want to ask you about some of your gear. So, I said something before about the guitar that you used to play that looks like a Strat that had been cut into a teardrop shape.
Yeah, it was
Tell me
a
about that guitar,
Ibanez.
man.
What's that?
Tell me about that guitar.
I think that was the first kind of. I don't know why. My mum had gotten me a couple of nice Gibsons, or one Gibson, and then I think I had a Strat for a little while, or maybe that Ibanez that I got was actually the next guitar that I got after that Gibson. I can't remember, but it had a low model JEM type guitar. I don't know what exactly, maybe an RG or something like that,
Yeah.
and it was black, and it had a wizard neck, so it was really flat, and I got used to playing those pretty early on.
Yep.
So I still, to this day, prefer flatter necks than the routed ones.
Yep.
But yeah, I think playing in Zoroaster, there was very much a kind of punk energy around that band, and the not give a fuck kind of attitude towards that band. And I can't remember whether I decided at one point. I covered it in glitter at one point, silver glitter,
Yeah.
and it was really uncomfortable to play. It was scratching me up, and I just
Oh
started
yeah.
hating the
Yeah.
guitar.
Yeah. It
So
would be.
I
Yeah.
think out of meanness towards the guitar, and also because I was like, oh well, it'll look fucked up if I do it. I just cut off the wings off it
Yeah.
myself with a hacksaw, and then just played it for a while before it got piffed. So
Wow.
yeah,
It
it
was
was
a
an
very
RG. I think.
identifiable guitar, man. That was
Yeah, I guess so. I guess
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
It was not a fun guitar to play after that point. It just was weighted really weirdly, and it didn't sit on your lap or anything. So I don't think I kept it for that long after that.
Yeah, right. And the other thing I remember you using back in the day was a Marshall, but it was out of its head shell. Am I remembering right? It was just like
I
the
think I had it carpeted. It was carpeted because back then you toured with all your gear, right?
yeah,
And I couldn't be bothered. Either I couldn't be bothered or I couldn't afford to get a proper. I think they were just too damn heavy for a start. But you put all that shit onto an airline and you toured it. Like I remember Martin taking his whole kit as well. So I would take my head. I think I took a quad box for a while there as well,
wow.
and Ben would take his whole rig as well. And I just got either I didn't want to get a proper case for it because it was just so damn heavy,
Yeah,
or I couldn't afford it. Either way, I thought maybe if I just put some red carpet on it, that'll ease the blows, the shocks that it gets. And of course, it died after about 2 months of touring like this.
damn.
And there was a fan at an airport, and I just gave it to them. I just said,
Really?
"Look, the valves are probably shot on it. Just take it. It's not working anymore, but you're welcome to have it.
I wonder if he still has
That was an
that.
800. I think it was an 800
An
because I
800,
remembered
yeah.
loving JCM 800s, and
Yep.
then at some point in my career, none of the higher shops started having them anymore, and they all went to 900s, and I would just loathe touring because I couldn't
Not the
get
same,
800s
huh?
anymore. Oh, they're horrible. I hate 900s so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. There's a scratchiness about them that I hear.
Yeah, there was a point where I couldn't play an 800 anymore. I had a beautiful Jubilee 5025, which I sold to a friend in Brisbane.
A
That was a
silver
great
one?
sounding. No, it wasn't silver. It was a Marshall 5125 Jubilee series, but it was a head, so a
Yep.
smallish head. The sound was really great. But there was a period where I was touring on 900s, and I thought, "Fuck this! I'll go to rectifiers because what could be worse than a 900?" And rectifiers were only marginally more tolerable in my sonic kind of ear.
I hear you. I hear you.
And then after that, the technology started changing, and I was introduced by Greg, our current mixer, into Quilter amps and like solid state amps that actually started sounding good.
Oh,
And
cool.
now I just tour with a Line 6 Stomp HX. That's all I use.
Nice. Nice.
So yeah,
Do you use the modeling in that, or
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I just
the
go
amp
straight
modeling?
direct,
Yep.
just straight into PA.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of people doing that now.
Yeah,
I did some guitar tech work for Jack Jones and Southern Sons about 2 weeks ago on their Queensland
yeah,
run, and
yeah.
Jack was running a big rack with an Egnator IE4 preamp and a Soldano X88 preamp, but going into one of his effects units and using the speaker simulation and just going direct. So it was a kind of a best of both worlds there, and it sounded mighty, but that's probably his playing as well.
Yeah. I mean, the difference it made to his mixes out front is phenomenal. Like he just gets so many great compliments, and it's because you're not fighting with amps on stage most of the time, and you can just focus on the vocals and getting the drums sounding good, and it just works so much better. So we all use in-ear monitors now, which is something that's happened over the last maybe 6 years.
Yeah, and you're comfortable using in-ears?
I am now for sure, and it just helps your singing just so much more.
That's what I hear. I've never tried them and had to sing, but the once or twice I've tried them, my guitar was too direct, and I thought I was fucking up, that I wasn't sitting in the pocket. And everyone's going, "No, it sounds fine," but it's just so direct.
Yeah, you've got to get the balance right. And if you're using an amp simulator, it kind of helps in a way because it does sound more like an amp that's playing in your head. But obviously, the spatial perception stuff is something that takes a while to get used to, for sure.
Yeah. So the old 800 you were talking about, is that what you used on the first 2 EPs?
It would have been. I'd say so, yeah. I don't know if I owned an amp at that point. I might have done, but I would definitely have picked an 800 over anything else in the studio. Possibly a basement as well at some point. I don't know.
Pedals, any drive pedals or anything?
The only pedal I really used live was a Rat at the beginning, a Rat pedal for distortion, and a wah. That was it, really.
Cool.
And towards the middle part of maybe after that, I probably got an OCD pedal, like one of those, and toured with that pretty much exclusively into a valve amp.
Nice. So Unit was quite a departure, embracing more of the technology and everything at the time. And man, I actually didn't realize how many known songs you guys have got until it was last night. I was showing my girlfriend, she's like, "Oh, do you remember these guys?" And every song I play, she's like, "Yeah, I know this song. And a lot of them are from Unit. Did you guys just set up your own Cubase setup or Pro Tools setup and do it all yourselves, or what was the process?
Yeah. We hired. I don't even know what we paid for it, but it was a house in the middle of the valley.
Yeah,
that was due for demolition in 4 weeks.
Oh, cool.
So it was just a house.
Yeah,
and then so Magoo Argonaut, who was our touring guy, mixer at the time, and Martin and Ben. I don't know what I was doing. I don't know why I wasn't involved in the setup. I was just like, yeah, do whatever, guys. So they got this house and they layered the house walls with carpet underlay. It was so ghetto. And it was literally just an empty 5-bedroom house. And Magoo set up the studio in the main room, the large room. And he had a Pro Tools rig. I think it was linked to Cubase on a probably a Mac, but maybe not, maybe a power computing thing as well. I don't know what he
Yeah.
was using.
Yeah.
And we used digital audio tapes like DAT, ADAT
Yep.
tapes
ADAT.
that
Yeah.
were striped.
Yeah.
That was the main setup. And then he had some outboard gear. I don't know what compressors. I think he was using smart compressors at the time.
Yeah.
Uh, he had a relationship with Joe Malone. We all knew Joe Malone in Brisbane, he's the engineering genius
Yep.
who makes his own
Yep.
preamps. So we probably had a few of his preamps and maybe some compressors of his. But yeah, he had that Neve Smart. I think he was really happy with that compressor, and he loved Sans amp distortion units. So he put distortion on pretty much anything. If there
Yeah.
was some problem with the mix, he'd go just put more distortion on it. That was his thing. And so we just set up in a couple of other rooms to do overdubs. And it was literally like being in the shittiest share house you could ever imagine. I think there was a dirty, piss-stained mattress on the ground for a couch, a couple of chairs strewn about. I had just gotten some new Roland gear from Roland through Warner, I guess, or through some connection. So we had that first groove box they put out, which is Polyester Girl, basically just written on that.
Oh, really?
And that was another piece of technology we had. We had a couple of rack-mounted S2000s or S2500s, I can't remember, XL Akai samplers, and there was not much else. Like not much else. Some mics. That was about it.
It's amazing now how technology has changed, because I used to have the external samplers and everything, and people don't understand what we went through in trying to fine tune your samples, try and find the starting point and everything by ear, turning knobs. Like, yeah, there it is. Now you just hit a button and it slices it all up for you and assigns it all to the different keys. So it was a lot harder back then, wasn't it? And even
there's a lot of manual labor, but it slowed you down, and it kind of made you think. It's kind of the equivalent in photography is that it's all point and shoot now, right? If you want it to be, you don't have to think about anything. But if you use one of those old manual cameras, you got to think about framing. You got to the timing, the framing becomes more. That's the priority,
absolutely
not the finished product. It's about whether you can control the environment to make it work, just to get the shot if you're lucky enough to get it. So I think that is definitely an evolution that's happened over time, and it's a thing that's altered the way that people produce music and produce art in general across the whole board.
Yeah. I think today as well, because we've got so many options, you get that whole option paralysis thing where back in the day, I had 5 kick drums on a drum machine that I had, little Boss one. Now I've got 5,000 kick drums, and
yeah, exactly.
Dude, it's really hard not to sit there and sort through the 5,000. It was so much easier with less options, huh?
Yeah, exactly. You have to train yourself to kind of just let things go. If that's a skill, that's the skill you kind of need now the most, to go, it's fine. No one is going to give a shit about this kick drum. Either it hits or it doesn't.
Yep.
And if it hits, leave it and move on and just focus on something else that's more important, like the vocals,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a completely different process. But, it was really fun because in that environment, in that house that was due to be demolished, we didn't care about anything in there. It didn't matter if you broke the walls. It didn't matter if you stuck a hole in the wall to stick leads through. No one would give a shit. And we could be in there at any time of night making a complete ruckus or, fiddling around with these fucked up old dinosaur things that took ages to work. And it didn't matter. So we were on nobody's time. I think that's the most important thing about when you're recording a record. You've got to be on nobody's time but your own. And you've got to be in a space where you can do whatever you want. So do whatever you want, literally.
That's awesome, man.
I think that's part of the reason why that record worked so well, because we had that environment. We had the people who had the time and had the priority to work. And yeah, it makes a difference. It definitely makes a difference.
Yeah. I saw a little snippet of the Beastie Boys recently talking about their Paul's Boutique album. And how they started doing it commando with just bits and pieces of the technology that they had access to. Then the record company wanted to send them to some big studios, and they said they recorded 1 or 2 songs, compared it to their original demos, went, it's not better. It's not better. Yeah. So, I've actually experienced this as well. Do you know the metal band Sunk Loto?
Yeah.
Yeah. So their last album they did for Sony, I did all the pre-production demos for. Okay. And man, we were vibing on those demos for a good year or more before the actual record came out.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's
and
hard.
When the real record came out, with that, which they spent $200,000 on, it just didn't have the same vibe. And I had so many people,
Yeah.
I'm biased because I recorded the original ones, and people just go, it's just not the same, man. Jason sounds like go in studio, clock's running, go.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas his vocals with me were just so much more personal. And
Yeah, exactly, exactly. When you've got that time and the money's going down the drain, you know it, and it really stresses you out. And if you have anxious
absolutely.
players and anxious creative people, they're not going to perform at their best. There's
Mm,
no way. So you're
mm,
way better just taking it out of that environment and doing it, like you said. I mean,
yep.
that's part of the whole demo-itis thing. Is that is particularly what they call demo-itis. A huge chunk of it is what you're talking about, where you go into a studio, you've listened to the demos, you're used to them for a start,
Yep.
and then you go into this really stressful situation and try and recreate something or make it better. It's never going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Uh,
rarely.
yeah. And I think a lot has to be said about not giving a fuck.
Yeah, yeah.
Like when you're doing the demo, go, I'm just going to put this as a placeholder to know
Yeah,
that something
exactly.
should go there, and you're not over analyzing. As soon as you
Yeah.
start trying to get that perfect take, you're taking the soul out of it, aren't you?
Most of the times, the first take of the vocals is the one.
Yeah,
Pretty much like
absolutely.
90% of the time.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to get really finicky about it and do thousands of takes like Billie Eilish and cut out every single syllable. The first take is usually going to be the one that works.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, once you'd finished recording Unit and then you had to go out and play the shit live, was there a big, okay, how do we do this now?
Yeah, we recruited Shane Rudkin as our keyboard player for live, so
Yep.
he would play the guitar.
Yep.
So he could cover a few of the keyboard things, because back then, like, backing tracks were not cool, right? You'd see a rock band and you hear backing tracks and everyone would be going, "What the fuck? This is not live music." Obviously, it's somewhat different now, where you're
Yeah,
lucky to see.
absolutely.
I mean, I saw an awesome band called Bob Villain the other night with who supported Amy Amel and the Sniffers.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah. Yeah.
uh, and they're an incredible band because they're kind of like a rap act. Like, he's a really good rapper, but they do punk music with guitar, like heavy guitars and a live drummer.
Yeah.
But there was no guitars on stage. It was just him, two-piece, him rapping and singing and screaming over backing tracks with just a drummer. And that's totally acceptable now. And it was a good show. It was fine. It was nothing wrong with it. And the music
Yep.
is awesome. I still love the band. It got me into the band more and listening more to their recorded music. But back then, it was a real kind of like, okay, these guys for real? Are they actually doing this to us?
Yep.
So, but the only way that I could, there were so many different configurations at the time because the technology was so difficult and inefficient and just clunky. So we
Yeah.
tried. We tried burning it on CDs, which
Yeah.
is ridiculous to have on stage. We tried mini disc, which was the next technology. Same problem. It would like every time the sub hit, it would
It
bounce and we'd be
skips.
like thrown.
I've been
Completely
there.
thrown
I've
out.
been there.
Fucking ridiculous. At the very end of that technology slump, I had a whole Pro Tools rig on stage, like fully encased and touring with us, which was just so stupid. Someone was telling me about the INXS drummers guy's Pro Tools rig that he toured with, and
Yeah.
he still uses today, apparently. But
Yeah,
it's
right.
literally the size of half this room, apparently. It's
Wow.
massive, just with
Wow.
all this built-in like obsolescence and not what are they called, redundancies in
Yep.
it. It's this
Yep.
huge rack system with loads and loads of hard drives and all this other shit that he
Yep.
built in the 80s or 90s, I guess. 90s
Yeah.
must have been.
Yeah.
But he still uses it today, apparently.
But you do need the redundancy rig, hey, because shit does
I've
fuck
never
up.
had one, though. We've never
Really?
had redundancy rigs ever.
Have
We've
you had any
always
major
gone,
fuck ups?
It fucks up bad. That's just bad luck. You start again, or if you can't do the song, you move on. We've
Yeah.
always been like that, and I think that's part of our charm. Like, you don't go to see us for a perfect show. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've gotten a little bit more consistent lately because I think we're a better band than we used to be, or we seem to be, I don't know, more professional about it or something. Our rig is much more efficient and works pretty much every time. But
What do
back
you
in
run
the
now?
day, I just run Ableton Live, and I've just started moving it to something else now. So I'm going to try and take an iPad Mini out and just run all the tracks off that.
To be honest, that's probably the most consistent setup that doesn't fuck up. I was playing with some guys in a cover band a few years ago now, and he just had an iPad and was sending a click out one side to his drummer and just a mono mix to the front. And I don't recall that ever fucking up. But I've so the head lecturer at the uni course that I'm doing is Brad Hosking, and he's Amy Shark's musical director.
All
And
right.
I've known Brad for quite a while now. And yeah, redundancy. He said early on in Amy's career, he had two laptops running Ableton. They were doing
Yep.
a big festival in WA in the afternoon, direct sunlight. Both of his laptops melted, and they were just like,
No.
yeah, so, yeah. And
Well,
you were
honestly,
saying,
because we don't there's not a lot of song. Maybe there's about 6 or 7 songs that require backing tracks.
yep,
We can just do a punk show if that all fell apart. We just
yep,
go, okay, well, we're not doing those. We can't even do the hits. You know, a lot of the hits have got backing on them as well. So
yep,
too bad. We're just going to do this now, and this is the way it is.
yeah,
And you know that does mean that no two show is exactly the same with us, because you never know where we're going to fuck up and how we're going to fuck up. So that's kind of the enticement, I think.
yeah, yeah. Man, I think people want to see the train wreck. I remember when I first started doing this live stream chat thing,
Yeah,
some people saying, you know, oh man, what if things fuck up? And things have fucked up. People have bad internet connections and it drops out, and
yeah.
they'll just keep talking until they log back in. I remember the first time I had a bit of a fuck up, I had Jennifer Batten, Michael Jackson's ex
Oh
guitarist,
wow. Yeah.
and she had her dog on her lap, and it decided to leap off and take out her laptop.
Oh
And that was the
no.
first time something fucked up. And I was like, that's why you tune in. You want to see the train wreck. And she just phoned back in as soon as she got set back up.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, it's life, you know. Things
it
happen.
is,
I don't want to go to a perfect show. Like I just find it boring, you know.
yeah, yeah. I did go to a concert recently, a pop artist, and I wasn't convinced that most of what I heard was actually being played. The drums and the
Yeah,
bass were definitely live, but the keyboards and guitars, I'm thinking, that's all on track, isn't it? Like, just,
yeah, sure.
yeah,
I mean, everyone's got a threshold for live, kind of what's being played, but it's all about performance. Like it is supposed to be a live performance. So if the performance is there and you're being entertained by a performer, no matter what they're doing, they could be playing their instrument and singing and doing an incredible job that way. Can be very impressive. But if they're giving something else of themselves and really working the crowd, and it's all backing behind them, it still can work, provided that persona is real and you are engaged with that person.
yep,
I think that's the thing that's impossible to recreate with
yeah.
AI and shit like that, which is definitely going to take over
That's
productions.
scary, isn't it? It's scary. Have you
Yeah.
heard AISIS?
No.
This was about 2 years ago. A dude did a record using AI, and
Oh, is that with Oasis kind of vibe?
you think
Yeah.
you're listening to unreleased Oasis tracks, and it's not.
Yeah, right.
Guy did it with AI. Yeah,
Yeah.
scary. But just talking about running tracks and stuff, man. You said you're using Ableton. Do you have it set up so that you can extend parts of the song, or do you have a
No,
set
we don't really
arrangement?
jam like that over our backing tracks. They're generally we're a pop band at heart, so we feel like playing more than 3 minutes is a bit much on a track for the most part. There's a couple of like prog rock tunes that Ben's written that go on a bit longer than that, but and maybe some stuff like Can that we like, the kind of hypnotic stuff that repeats. But mostly we don't jam over backing tracks. I mean, I don't think it's something Ben really enjoys a lot of the time playing to.
Yeah.
He is definitely more of a live jamming person. If
Yep.
we go to write a record, he will insist on a live jam at some point, if not at many points before, so he can write in that environment. I
Yep.
don't need that. I can sit in front of a computer for hours and hone a beat and hone lyrics by myself, and then
Yeah.
take it in and go play whatever you want over it, but just try and keep the vibe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's generally the kind of flexibility I have. But no, we hit play and then it stops. You know, I trigger each song at the moment,
Yep.
and it usually stops, and then I can find another one on a keyboard that's next to my mic stand.
Cool.
It's that
Cool.
simple.
Now, talk about lyrics and stuff, man. You guys sort of were pushing it with, you know, some of the expletives and, you know, sucked a lot of cock to get where you are and all that kind of stuff. Did you face any kickback? Oh, not kickback, but just yeah, were people opposed to that in any way? Going, oh, you can't say that, you know, with censorship. Back
Oh
then?
yeah, I mean, any old pedophile that was around at the time, like Alan Jones. He did wonders for our career, actually. Yeah, a lot of the Christian fundamentalists as well definitely pushed the sales of that record. So I thank them on the regular for that,
Are you
for
saying that
being like,
Alan Jones had words to say about your
yeah,
songs?
he had beef. He definitely had beef with us. I think we're mentioned in his book, even.
So
Apparently,
I
that's what
take it
Ben's
people
told.
are aware of him, his arrest, what he got arrested for in England years ago, right?
Years ago, I don't know. When was that? I'm not even aware of what his history was. All I knew was that he was a fuckhead and I had nothing to do with him. I didn't give a shit what he said.
Dude,
But
he got done. How do I say this without sort of getting sued? Um, Performing lewd acts in fucking public
yeah,
toilets.
yeah, I'm sure. I mean, all power to him. I don't really, I wouldn't hate on someone for doing that. I mean, I think George Michael's great. Um,
But
but the
for
fact
somebody
that
who'd
he was,
be so vocal against that, that actually
yeah,
got done for
exactly.
it. Yeah.
Being such a vocal hypocrite and really making it harder for people who to be themselves in this society. I don't agree with that. I feel like that was his shtick. It was just his performance, and he was getting paid a lot of money to perform that. So yeah, he did that. I think he was outraged or supposedly outraged by our record and used his radio show to piss on it on several occasions. And we are mentioned in his book apparently. So yeah, I think a lot of that censorship and a lot of that pushback really excites kids.
Yeah.
It's worked for decades and decades, right? Ever since the Beatles, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
you have those conservative types going up against it, so the kids love it even more. And it definitely helped Unit a lot, and probably our earlier records as well. But yeah, he was definitely a good kickback guy, and even Warner were like opposed to. They were like, they heard "Sucked a Lot of Cock" and were like, we can't put that on the, you can't call it that on the record. Can you change it to rinsing or something? And I was like, no, sorry, it's just gonna, it's not coming out unless it's called that.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay. So you can get away with a lot when you're selling records. As soon as you stop selling records, then they come into the studio and go, why don't you try this or that? And that really started happening on the fourth record after art started dwindling and we started selling less. They had a new A&R guy come in and start messing around with the record we did in England with Andy Gill from the Gang of Four.
Oh yeah.
Particularly that Fat Cop song of Ben, which kind of ruined it for him. Every time we play it live, he thinks about that A&R guy coming in and telling him about the chorus and how he should do it this way. And
Oh
it was
really?
pretty, yeah,
That
yeah,
sucks.
yeah.
Hey, somebody's just asked about any memories you can share from the tour with the Chili Peppers. My memory of the Brisbane Entertainment Centre gig was that Regurgitator handed it to them that night. Ooh, that's a glowing review.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of people say that to me. Strangely enough, I think they were pretty much at the height of their career at that point. Maybe not the best they ever played, but they were certainly still performing really well. I remember the whole of the band came to see us at a sideshow in Perth,
Mm,
except for Anthony. So
yep.
Chad was there, and not John, Dave Navarro, and Flea came along and saw us play at some tiny little place, maybe the Planet or something like that in Perth. And we were kind of excited about that. It was a great first tour for us because we'd never played stadiums before. We were
Oh, cool.
just kids.
Yeah.
I was only 23 or 24 at the time.
Yeah.
Ben and Martin just a little bit older. And so, yeah, we'd never experienced that. I mean, the sound was dreadful, and it's
Yeah.
always still dreadful
Always is, isn't
in
it? Yeah.
stadium. Although we played recently with Weezer in Boondall, and I felt like that was the first time that I'd ever been able to play to a crowd of that size. Like normally, I don't feel like I can entertain a crowd bigger than 1,000, maybe 1,500 at the most. But that time, I actually felt comfortable on stage. And I felt like I was entertaining for the
Yeah,
first
right.
time.
Yep.
Some bands are really great at it, and others should never really play. Like a punk band like us, we're so used to playing shitty little venues that hold 300, 400 people and just having a ball and having a sweaty old time. That when you
Yeah.
get put into that kind of venue, it feels so alien. It sounds, cavernous. You're playing really fast music a lot of the time, and so it doesn't translate very well. There's a
Yeah.
reason they call it stadium rock,
Yeah.
and it's because of the acoustics. And a lot of bands specifically wrote that kind of music to play bigger venues and became bigger bands because of that reason. If you
Yeah,
play
yeah,
slow melodic stuff, it works better in those venues.
yeah,
But I thought they were nice. They didn't really say too many things to us. The only odd thing that I found about it was that they seemed to wear makeup all the time. Like,
yeah.
obviously
Right.
Navarro, it's the thing for Navarro, but the whole band seemed to be
Yep.
wearing makeup all the time at that stage. I guess they were entering their late 30s, 40s at that point. I can't remember how old they were,
Yeah.
but they were obviously at that level of fame you have. You're constantly under the spotlight, and yeah, they seem pretty nervous, kind of being out in public for sure.
What
But
other
they were all
cool?
really nice, and they
Yep.
all complimented us. Like the rhythm. I never met Anthony the whole tour, but the other guys complimented us and said we were, a great band to play with, and they were all very talkative and stuff. So it was cool.
What other cool bands did you guys get to play with?
Oh man, there's been so many. In the early days, our first big shows that were set up by our manager Paul, probably Primus in the Roxy, which was an amazing show for us to play. We played
Nice.
with also John Spencer's Blues Explosion at
Yeah.
Van Gogh's Earlobe
Yeah.
in East Brisbane. That was one of the first kind of bigger shows we played as well. Yeah, I mean, we played with so many bands. I mean, recently we played with Kiss for the first time. I never played with Kiss before. That was outrageous.
Wow. Wow.
And we did a couple of side shows with Weezer, which was lovely. Except
Yeah.
that I probably had the weirdest interaction I've ever had with that that guy River
Yeah.
backstage, just saying, "Oh, I just wanted to thank you for having us," and he just sort of crawled up inside himself. I just was like, "God, I'm sorry, I didn't." But he's notoriously awkward
Really?
personality. Yeah, very very difficult to talk to. He's an interesting character. But yeah, I just felt like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to even talk to you after that.
Wow.
But yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately, most of the big bands I've met, I haven't had the best experience with, just because of timing and because people don't want to be harassed all the time. I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
say that the nicer people that I've met have been probably, oh god, I can't even think of a name now. From Garbage, what's her name?
Oh, Shirley Manson.
Shirley was lovely,
Yeah.
and I mean, we've had a relationship with Peaches for a long time, and she was in one of our
She's
videos.
cool.
She did a collab with us on the last record, and that's something I'm starting to do a lot more, just working with different kind of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I met Björk, and she was like meeting an angry drunk mother. It was just awful. And then
Really?
I really respect these people listening to their music, and then you meet them. Like, I did a tour with the Prodigy as well as a solo. We'd play with them as Regurgitator as well, but I also did a solo tour with them, and
Yeah.
they were just like Bristol boys, like really just bratty as fuck, and
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
really connect with them. So I loved that band for a long time, and that was another band that Martin introduced me to as well. So he really pushed me into that electronic side of things,
Yeah.
and
Right. That's interesting to hear, man. So I've been friends with Dave Leslie from the Baby Animals pretty much since I was a teenager, and had quite some good conversations about who have you met that's been cool and all that. And he's always said the opposite. He said, "Man, most of the really big people that they've played with have been really nice, and it's usually the people that are on their way up that are being the assholes, and
right,
they tend to fall pretty quickly as well."
sure.
So yeah, that's interesting to hear that.
I think it's a lot of its context as well. Like, if you're meeting someone at an after party and they're drunk, or you're meeting someone who's stressed for time, then you've just got to accept that no star is going to be on their best behavior all the time. No person is going to be that way, especially if they're being bombarded by people constantly. People we've
Sure.
toured with, we've never really toured with any horrible people. Like, they've usually been really nice.
Yep.
People that support bands have been incredible most of the time, and the people we've supported have been really lovely as well. I've never really run into any kind of divas or any nastiness. Even some of the brattiest bands and craziest bands, like the Minchicks from, I don't know if you know the Minchicks, but they're probably
No.
my favorite punk band of all time.
Yeah.
Extremely underrated band. They don't exist anymore, but the guitarists, they're brothers, Cody and God, what's his name? But the other brother became Unknown Mortal Orchestra.
Don't know 'em.
Well, they were a massive kind of electronic sort of, I guess, chill band. They blew up around the same time that Tame Impala did, like similar kind of vibes,
Yeah.
but just a single guy doing all like DJ kind of work and sample work, and he's an incredible guitarist. But the Minchicks, they're fucking nuts, like really crazy band, an incredible band. You got to listen to. if you like punk crossover music, that crazy S Dumb No record is phenomenal. Like some of the riffs and it's like listening to really early Yes, like prog kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
really out there and punk mixed with it. And just the playing is phenomenal. Their father did the production in their basement. It sounds terrible,
Wow.
but
Wow.
as a punk band, they're pretty much everything you could ever want in my mind.
And is that Min as in MIN? I got to look this up.
What's that?
MIN chicks? Is it Min?
Mint,
Is that
mint chicks.
Mint? Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It's a
Hard of hearing muso, you see.
It's a New Zealand, a Kiwi expression, I think, for hot girls.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
But yeah, the drummer is just like phenomenal. The bass player, everything about that band just gels. But the singer is so crazy, Cody. He would just on stage, you just never know what the fuck. You turn around, he'd be on the ceiling like Spider-Man, and then he'd fall onto one of the wedges, perfectly poised. His vocals are incredible. Yeah, the guitar playing, everything is amazing about that band.
Yeah.
But they were like, we'd go out to clubs afterwards, and he just was so impulsive. He would just go up to the DJ decks when the DJ had gone to the toilet and start fucking with them, or he'd start hanging off the disco ball in the middle of the room and get kicked out. He got kicked out of every single club we went to.
Wow.
He seemed like a real mild-mannered dude, but when he got the impulse, he would just do crazy shit. I think on the last tour, he was almost, I think he was kicked out of the country because he tried to steal a gun from a cop just for funsies. Like
Jesus.
Just a mad dude. But he's they're all sweethearts, and they're really amazing. And they were lovely to tour with. But one of the most underrated punk bands out there, I reckon.
Cool. I have to look them up. So I just joked about my hearing then, man. Has the band life and touring life taken any effect on your hearing?
My hearing's probably not great. It's not terrible. Ben's is definitely getting way worse, particularly on one side. Yep. And the in-ears are a double-edged sword because technically you should have them lower, but the tendency is to turn them up to get a little bit more vibe, and you're getting more direct sound because of it. So you're probably doing just as much damage in some ways if you're not careful with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is something that I think about. Especially, my hearing is actually way worse if I've been mixing a record, though. If I've been working on a record and mixing it in headphones, which I always do now.
Yep.
My hearing does suffer a lot.
It's funny, just with Brian Johnson from AC/DC, when he had to take some time out because of his hearing, the guy that invented in-ear monitors actually issued an apology and said, I'm really sorry, man. That's probably my technology that's done that. Yeah, and it's another reason I've avoided it is because I want to save what's left of mine. But
if you're very disciplined about it and you get ones that are closed, that'll block out most of the drums, and you can have it at a reasonable level, then an hour's listening is not going to do that much damage. If you're careful about it, it's much better than. I mean, I used to tour with just always using earplugs, so mine didn't get hammered as much. Ben would just constantly play without them. Yeah. Even to go see bands, I wear them. I've always done it.
Same.
So probably, the in-ear and the headphone mixing has probably done more damage over the last 10 years than the early days. But the difference it's made with my vocals is phenomenal. Like, I'm trying to sing with your head voice with, earplugs in, blocking out the rest of the band. It's really not that great. You're going to strain your voice. So it's one or the other, really. You lose your hearing or you lose your voice. That's just what happens when you get older.
Sure. So, mate, you guys had like a fair bit of time apart, and then, it was only a couple of years ago you guys got back together to do some shows?
I mean, we've never really had a proper hiatus except for when I had my first baby. So my first kid, I think we took about 18 months off.
Yep.
And that was really the only real hiatus we've had. We've always played the odd show. Maybe at the lowest point, we were only playing like 10 shows a year. But lately, we've done more recording and released more records and done a tour every 2 or 3 years, like a proper tour. And we take festival shows all the time still. I think we're still a reasonably good quality live band.
Yep.
And that's the thing about 90s bands. We played a lot with some of the older bands, and just watching them, I'm like, I can see why these guys still work and they're still good, because they are really good musicians and they play well as a band. Like Magic Dirt, Jebediah, they all work well live. It's quite amazing to watch. And it is very different to seeing a modern act with loads of backing tracks, like watching a live band, is
Yeah.
somewhat different. And when it works, it's impressive. And if you can still do it at this age and you're doing it well, then I think it's, it's worth keep going. Not
Yeah.
just for the nostalgic trip, but also to show kids something a little bit different.
There's a real resurgence in the 90s bands.
Mm.
I know a friend of mine's got a really cool 90s grunge tribute band called Outshined. And they pull some big crowds.
Yeah, right. I
And
listened to
just
that Bad Motor Finger record recently, actually, just to
yeah,
hear it again. It's
yeah,
pretty good.
yeah. And yeah, I've just noticed a lot of the Australian bands from back then are out touring again. And
Yeah, yeah.
um, I think we're at that age where you got to make the most of it before everyone gets too old and not go out anymore. And I mentioned to you earlier that I play with all the 80s pop stars.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I worked with a couple of guys that were involved in that band before I joined. I was working at a music store
Yeah.
and they were getting some huge crowds back then. But a lot of those people that grew up on that music are now sort of around 60 odd and aren't really going out as much as they used to.
Sure.
And it seems to be more now the 90s bands that people are maybe getting on. It's like, yeah, make the most of it while they're still there, but their kids are totally into it.
Yeah,
That's
that's
one thing
right.
I've noticed at uni is the kids know a lot of 90s bands, not your traditional grunge bands. It's more Radiohead, Rage Against the Machine,
Mm.
Muse, stuff like that, although they were probably a little bit later.
Muse is not a 90s band, is it?
No, that's more 2000s, wasn't it?
I think so,
Yeah,
yeah. Just after
yeah,
us.
yeah. And I would always say, how do you guys know this music? And they're like, oh, through our parents.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is a lot of that generational passing down. And the kids, they seem to like it. I mean, I'm always surprised that there's like 20-year-olds, sub 20-year-olds sometimes in our shows, and they're really into it. It's really great to see. And I think that if you can keep the level of performance up and you keep fit and you can still sing and you can still enjoy it and still have fun on stage, then there's no reason why you know, that piece of art can't keep going and keep generating new feedback and new kind of audiences.
Yep.
And I love that about it. And I'd love to keep doing it until I drop.
Yeah.
As long
Yeah.
as it's not embarrassing,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
fine.
Well, you guys haven't gotten fat. So yeah, that's one of the things is a lot of people get a bit older
Yeah, I
and they
mean,
get fat, but you guys are still in good nick. Actually, I was at a music store, Pedal Empire
oh
in
yes,
Brisbane a year or two ago, more like 2 years, I'd say. And
Ben loves
Ben
that
came
place.
in
Yeah,
with his pedal board wanting to get it rewired. And he was right beside me. I heard him sort of going, oh, yeah, I just want to get this all rewired properly, get a pro job done. I didn't click it was him. I did not
yeah,
click it
right.
was him at all until he left. And the guys in the shop went, oh, we just had Ben from Regurgitator in. And I instantly rewound and went, oh, fuck me, that was him. I would have said something if I had known that was him.
Yeah, I mean, he's looking pretty good. He started going to the gym pretty much every day over the last year. He quit drinking, which is another thing that kills old rock stars. Obviously,
Yeah.
drugs and alcohol. I've seen a lot of alcoholics in our time like come through. Probably the worst one I ever saw was that they had a ringing. Who was it? Custard had a ring in one year. I mean, Custard are pretty full on as well, but
Yeah.
they had a ring in of a slide guitarist, like a lap steel guy. Holy
Yeah.
shit! That you could smell that guy from a mile away. He was on his way out. That dude was such an alcoholic. It was so bad. And you see that a lot of the time and just go, I cannot. That is not happening to me. No fucking way.
Mm.
And I think a lot of the reason why we still can perform is because we got off that shit or never got involved. And it's really changed Ben's life. Not drinking. He's been dry for about a year and a half now, and he's feeling so much better. So less like a lot less paranoid about playing and being on stage and doing the things that he does, and just a lot more clear-headed. I mean, I've never done it particularly, so I've never had to suffer that, but I think a lot of people cope with anxiety by drinking and using drugs,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
And when that goes, then you've got to like face your demons and kind of mature in a way that you've never given yourself a chance to do so. So it's really nice when you can see that in older musicians or older creatives, and they can get through it and develop afterwards as well.
Yeah.
So that's really nice.
I've been really lucky. I've never really had the taste for alcohol, but
Yeah, I'm the same.
I've had a couple of friends in the last 2 years drink themselves to death. And
Yeah.
I can't say that about any other drug. We talked about being a bit naive back in the 90s, and there was junkies all around us and we didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't know anyone that ever died from it, but alcohol, I've seen that really ruin a lot of lives. And when people say, "Oh, hey man, have a beer," I'm like, "Oh, no, thanks, mate." The first thing most people think, "Oh, you're a recovered alcoholic." Sorry, mate. I'm like, no, I just never
Yeah,
had the
yeah. Look,
taste. And
I got
I've
asked
just
so
seen,
many times to go to parties, and like that's the reason why I write songs about that stuff, because I was always the straight guy, always the designated driver.
yep.
Um, I only had a couple of kind of like small periods in my life where I went back to drinking occasionally, but yeah, some people it just doesn't vibe with. One of my
Mm.
best friends in Hong Kong is a magician, and he's an AA dude, because he worked in bars all through his 20s and got fully into it. He stopped basically because he started bleeding from every fucking orifice and he had to go to AA. I went to one of his meetings, and my God, some of the stories he tells me about, just guys being so drunk they fall asleep with their babies in the bath and the babies drown and shit like that.
Oh,
It's just
fuck.
like, oh, yeah, you don't want that in life, man. It's just
Yeah.
not worth it.
And it's legal. That's the funny thing is, like
Yeah.
people, we say, "Oh, pot bad," or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, uh, especially when I was a single guy and I'd be on Tinder or Bumble or one of those things, and I would see these women, no drugs, no drugs. Yet every picture, there's them with their champagne in their hand. It's like,
That's funny. That's
you're
really
not
funny.
putting two and two together here, are you? Yeah. So it's really weird that it's acceptable. Yeah.
I know.
Mm. So, dude, are you still writing stuff for Regurgitator as well? You guys working on new stuff as well? Or-
We did a show. We did the album last year, which was really great, and I really enjoyed doing it. But we'll probably take a quiet year this year and just do the odd kind of festival and just bubble away, and then we might turn our hands to writing again towards the end of the year, I think, at this point. But I'm going to work with a few other people. I'd like to do a hip hop record in between because I'm enjoying doing hip hop again.
So, you said that there was a new record last year. This is another thing that I miss about current times. Um, hey, I think it was Time Off magazine just came to my
Oh
head.
yeah, there's Time Off. There was Beat and there's Time Off. There's
Yeah,
two of them.
yeah. So you would know when people were releasing new stuff, or you'd go to the record store and you'd see the posters. Hey, Regurgitator's got a new album coming out, and it's like, and now I, I mean, I just looked up the Deftones on Apple Music the other day, and there's been so many albums that they've put out in recent years that I had no idea that they were still putting
Of
out new
course.
stuff. And
I mean,
so
you've got to kind
that's
of the amount of stuff out there is so wide, and the amount of releases is so huge. You really have to narrow your focus and go, I need to find this thing, and you have to make the effort to find it if you want
yeah,
to discover stuff again like that.
yeah,
Or you just take whatever the algorithm gives you, right? So you're not necessarily going to hear anything about a band like us if you
yeah,
don't make that effort, or a band like Deftones even.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the reason.
So what's your new album called?
The new album is called Invader.
Invader.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And see, I had no idea that you had one out, but I do now. So,
Oh, you should check it out. It's an interesting record.
yeah,
And as I said, it's got a few collaborators, which is very unusual for us. We've never really done it before. So there's an Indigenous rapper on it called JK47, who's amazing. Peaches is on a track.
cool.
And there's an Indigenous writer called Tyson Yunkaporta who wrote a poem I got in contact with because I loved his book, Sand Talk. Incredible Indigenous thinking book, which really just blew my mind and continues to do so. It's just the colonialist mindset that I'd been living in, and not thinking that I was uneducated about Australia and its history. It just really made me think that I really needed to focus more on what was actually happening and the way that Indigenous cultures, their intelligence and the way that they actually are structured is
Yeah.
so fundamentally different to my understanding of society. And that book and his other book, Right Story, Wrong Story, as well. He's just an incredible thinker, very worth a look at. Another book that I've been recently like fawning over was Rick Rubin's Creative Act book. I don't know if you've read that or heard of that
I
one,
haven't,
but
no.
it's really good if you're stuck creatively and
Yeah.
you've got roadblocks in your flow. That book, it's kind of like a Zen Buddhist book. So if you're not into that sort of stuff, you think that's mumbo jumbo, whatever, it may not be your thing. But I found that reading it just freed me from overthinking, freed me from just getting too caught up in what other people think, or which as your career progresses, you can find yourself in those loops. So
Absolutely.
no matter what people say about him as a producer, and he has produced some of the biggest records of all time, a
Yeah.
lot of the newer stuff not so great. Some of the old stuff not so great, but been some incredible records as well. But I think the way he facilitates creativity in other people is his key skill.
Yep.
And when you read that book, you kind of get an understanding where he's coming from and how it works.
Yeah, right. And did you self-produce this record? Did you guys record
Yeah,
it
we
at
did.
home? Did you go to a studio?
We only went to record drums actually in Hunting Ground in Maruka. We did a drum session there, which
Cool.
was quite useful.
Yeah. Hey?
But it was mostly written at home. There was one initial thing out in Brisbane as well. So I flew up to do most of the pre-production stuff. Plainsland, I think it was. There was this weird little studio in a shed out there that we did a pre-production thing and wrote a couple of songs out there. But like I said, I tend to prefer to work at home alone
Yep.
until I'm happy
Yep.
and then take it in. So I did a lot. A lot of the writing was well after that. And then getting other people involved was something that I really wanted to try because I'd never really done it before.
Yep.
And I'd really like to do a lot more like that as well.
Cool. And what are you recording with? You Pro Tools these days? Or?
I use Studio One now. I weaned myself off Pro Tools over COVID and taught myself
Yep.
how to use Studio One. And it's gotten a lot better over the last, so now it's 7.1, I think. And it's really, I would never go back to Pro Tools. They had me over barrel for so long with their subscription models and then just shit, like monster code, like old code. So it just never went anywhere. And yeah, I can just remember how many times it crashed on me, and it was just like, I want to do this, but I can't, and Studio One just ticks all the boxes for me. Obviously, it's usually whatever thing you start with is going to be the best for you. But if you can wean yourself off something that's caused a lot of headaches for you and get onto something new, then sometimes it's worth it. And in this case, it's definitely been worth it because it's a beautiful balance between audio malleability and MIDI control. Like Cubase is the master of MIDI, and particularly for orchestration stuff. I did a little bit of TV work, which required like big orchestra kind of templates, and Pro Tools handled it okay. And I've not really done. And then I made the switch to Studio One, so I haven't done a lot of TV work since then. So I'm not sure how Studio One will go, but it seems to have most of the tools that I'd need.
Yeah,
so,
right.
But for writing pop music and rap music and like different genres, I find it really, really easy.
Yeah, right. Cool.
It's really
I started dabbling with Studio One for the same thing, man. Pro Tools and their subscription. I'm a broke uni student right now, and I have to have Pro Tools. But my subscription ran out and they tried to renew it, and I didn't have enough cash for it and I'm thinking I'm just going to cancel it. Bounce out a couple of sessions that people might need some stems and things. So, but I'm getting rid of anything that subscribes. That Slate plugins as well. You think, oh, this is great. It's like, you know what? I've got equivalents of that in stuff that I actually bought and it just works. No need to upgrade. So that whole business model that people are starting to do now, I think people are starting to push back against it and just go,
if Pro Tools
fuck off.
It's just that they just stagnated and give you like tiny little updates. Like the amount of updates that Studio One has had over the last 3 years has been insane. Even since they were bought by Fender, they were recently bought out by Fender, I think a year ago or something.
Oh wow!
But
Didn't know that.
It's still doing quite well, like keeping up with all the others. It's a bit of an underrated one, I think. I mean, it's very difficult because Pro Tools are the industry standard, so they sell on that pretty much 90% of it.
I think that's changing. I think that's changing because I'm going to uni with all the young people, and I see what they're using themselves on their laptops, and it all seems to be Logic, Ableton, and Studio One hasn't really started to take hold here. I'm seeing more Americans use it, but I got given a copy by Presonus of Studio One 6, and it's really hard learning a new DAW, man, isn't it? Like when you
open it up, it's a bit of a candy store. So there's a lot. There is a lot. If you spend about 3 months with it, you basically au fait with everything and go, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't have this before. Like just even slip editing and stuff in that, like, oh my God, it just saved my life so much with like editing drums and shit. It's just so much more intuitive in so many ways. And the dragging and the dropping in it, it's great. But obviously there's a lot of people who use Logic and there's a lot of people that use Ableton. and they love it. So whatever works, really. It's whatever
Yeah.
works.
I tried doing a mix for somebody recently in Logic because they'd started it. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to try and do all this. But it just got really messy really quickly for
Yeah,
me.
I think mixing Logic is tricky, and live obviously is not a great mixer either.
No.
I think that's where Studio One works for me. It's laid out. You can see all the things. You can make them small. You can make them large. You can pull out windows across two screens, no problem. And makes sense to me. It's all drag and drop, so you can just drag effect sends. You can grab a plugin, drag it, and it creates an effect sends instantaneously. It has a lot of shortcuts that once you get to know, and you can also create macros with it really easily. So it has a lot of bonuses for me. And like I said, it's a beautiful mixture between the MIDI facilities and the audio as well.
Yeah.
So once you get used to kind of the quirkiness of it, there are some things in Pro Tools that I still miss, like some looping aspects and stuff like that are never going to be fixed because that's the way it is.
Yep.
But apart from that, I think it's really ahead of the game for most of the stuff.
Yeah. Have you ever
I
tried?
would recommend it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it another go. I did mix something a couple of years ago. There's this really cool band that's getting a lot of work around here lately called Disgraceland, and they're
Oh yeah.
a punk band fronted by an Elvis impersonator, and
Okay.
they are opening for a lot of bands lately.
Yeah.
Oh, who have I seen that advertise they're opening for? Rose Tattoo, James Rain. They just opened for Pseudo Echo the other day. And I did their initial demos. Like I went to a studio that I built years ago and filmed it. And then I got all the audio and just did like a bit of um, a collage of songs for them as a promo reel. I think they've probably long outgrown that, but they're really starting to take hold and get some great stuff. But I did all that mix. I thought, okay, there's only one way to put something through its paces. And I did it all in Studio One. And I had to Google a lot of stuff along the way, but some things was like, oh, of course, that was really easy to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking you've just talked me into giving Studio One another go.
There was one thing that I thought was really missing that I missed from Pro Tools that they just fixed now. So you can now bounce groups, like freeze groups. I could never do that before, and it was kind of like, that was part of the key for orchestral. But the thing is, I'm still on an Intel machine, right?
Yep.
I'm going to update to an M4 like Ultra this year at some point when they come out, a studio. And so a lot of this stuff won't matter. You can just run thousands of VSTs at once in real time. You won't even need to bounce stuff down. It's kind of crazy. So when the technology gets to that next level, a lot of the stuff that you thought you needed from a DAW, you don't actually need to worry about anymore because it can handle everything. So that's another thing to think about. But you do have to spend time. You have to dedicate yourself and go, I'm not ever going to use Pro Tools again because I hate it. And I really did that. I drew the line, and I didn't have to do any TV stuff at that point. So I was like, I've got 6 months to get used to it and get it out of my system. And I never open it now. Like I've not opened it for 2 years now, I think.
Wow, man. I'm going to export some mixes and stems for something I did last year, just in case they want that. And then I'm going to burn the subscription. Same with Slate Digital.
Yeah, when I say industry standard, it's just if you work in studios.
Yeah.
It's still Pro Tools. Somehow it's still Pro Tools.
But
I mean, as an audio recording, it's solid.
Now you can bring your own laptop and just interface directly.
True. I think that's probably going to be what changes the game eventually. What you just said, definitely.
So what?
I have to go pretty soon, unfortunately, because I've got to take something back to a hire shop of all.
Sure.
It's a terrible excuse.
Can I just quickly ask you before you do go? You've mentioned a couple of times doing TV work, man. What type of TV work?
I was kind of into animation. I've always been into animation, so I put my feelers out to see if I could get any animation soundtrack work.
Yeah.
Just see, and I did a local thing in Melbourne called Kitty Is Not a Cat, which is like a kids program. The guy used to play in, or still does. Oh God, now I can't remember the name. A kind of classic 80s, 90s indie band. He was one of the directors. I can't even think of the name now. They're a great band. Cold Feeling was one of their records. But that's Morris. And another director from the ABC was part of the team. And that went for 3 seasons, I think. So I produced probably about 3 hours of music altogether.
Cool.
So they were 13-minute episodes, and they just wanted a real variation, a huge variation of music. So I thought, oh, that's kind of my thing. I can pretty much ape anything. So I gave that a go. And it was a great learning curve and really fun to do. And then I did a couple of random things for HBO and some for Warner Brothers Blue Ribbon, like some like adult kind of cartoon stuff as well.
Yeah.
But that was about it. I haven't done much soundtrack work. I don't think I have the chops to really do it quickly enough. I need to
Sure.
spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
I can be pretty dedicated at it, but it does require, if you're a great piano player, for example, or a good keyboardist, it's a great job to do because you can do things quite quickly and you can have fun doing it, and it's not like an arduous thing. But I had to do like complex classical pieces, and I can't play the piano, so I'd have to like sit there and think about what was in my head and try and get it into MIDI and make it sound realistic, and it would take me forever, but
Yeah.
it was a fun thing to do, fun gig to do.
Awesome. Quan, thanks so much for your time, man. I know when I first reached out to you, you were like, oh, I don't know if I really got much to talk about guitars, but there's so much more. I could talk to you about music production for another hour or two,
What I was really hoping to have today was, just to go back to guitars, I was going to pick up my new Ernie Ball Music Man Albert Lee. It's like a mint green Albert Lee.
Is that what you're playing? Yeah, the white one, right? I saw some pics.
That's a Mariposa, which is that Rodriguez guy from At the Drive-In's guitar. Like I love signature guitars. I just buy them all the time.
Yeah.
I've never had one of my own, obviously, because I'm not really a guitarist. But the ones I do tend to gravitate are the signature guitars. So I had like a Joan Jett special for a while, and then I've had this Omar guitar, which I love as my main guitar, and I recently got an Albert Lee. A mint green colored Albert Lee one, which is great Jetson kind of angles and stuff on it. But those Music Men, I would never play a Fender or Gibson ever again because they just play so well. They're so well made and they're such beautiful guitars. So I was really excited because I was getting the neck shaved on this one. I got a second hand in Tasmania, but it's a bit too thick for me. So I've given it to a guy, a luthier, to shave down the neck. Yeah. So I was hoping it was going to be ready today because I really wanted to play it and show it, but I don't have it, unfortunately.
Bummer.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I'm going to have to come and see you guys when you're touring again this time, man. I'm going to keep an eye open.
It's going to be thin on the ground this year, but I'll definitely let you know when the next Brisbane show is, or Gold Coast, sorry.
Gold Coast, yeah.
I'm not sure if we'll do one for a while, but we'll definitely do a run towards the end of the year. There's some talk of like a singles run, which means I have to learn all the fucking singles that we put out.
Yeah,
do every single single from the records that we've released, so that'll be interesting.
If you're up to it at the time, man, I'd love to bring a camera along and do a quick little rig rundown of what you're playing through before the show and stuff. If you get time.
Yeah, more than welcome, man. More than welcome.
That'd be awesome. Quan, thanks so much, man, for your time. It's been fucking great chatting to you.
Thanks, man.
Settle down. Dude, I'm going to hit the button. I've got the magic button right here, which brings up the logo, and I say, adios, amigos.
Ciao, man.